over fields of green, remembering the faces, the moments unseen, the hands that built a dynasty, the vision in their eyes, echoes in the auction barn beneath an endless sky. This is the bullseye, turn the volume high, for the icons of the ages that never will die. From the show ring thunder to the quiet strength they knew, hear their stories now, coming right on through.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, and today I have one heck of a story to share with you. It's about a bull whose impact on our industry is so profound that it'll blow your mind. Picture this. Every single registered Holstein on Earth today, every single one from the high-tech dairies of California to the pastures of New Zealand, from the ancient dairy regions of Europe to the emerging farms of Asia, they all trace back to one bull. One bull from a modest Wisconsin farm. His name was Johanna Rag Apple Pabst, and this is his incredible story. Now before I dive in, let me paint you a picture that'll give you goosebumps. Imagine a Western Union boy pedaling his bicycle through the crisp Quebec countryside on an April morning in 1926. Telegraph wires are humming overhead as spring awakens the landscape around Hudson Heights. When he finally turns up that winding, tree-shaded drive to Mount Victoria Farms, gravel crunching beneath his wheels, he's carrying 15 words that would literally reshape Holstein history forever. Johanna Rag Apple Pabst, sold for $15,000. Congratulations, O.G. Clark. $15,000 in 1926. That's over $200,000 in today's money, folks. But this wasn't just about buying another champion bull. This was about capturing lightning in a bottle, the cornerstone of a vision so scientifically precise and audaciously ambitious that it bordered on the impossible. Let's rewind to where it all began, because every great story has humble beginnings. We're talking about a modest farm 3 miles north of Hartford, Wisconsin, in the winter of 1921. Philip Linker, at 69 years old, is feeling the weight of nearly 7 decades spent working the land. He's built a respected 173-acre Holstein operation, but he's gradually passing it to younger hands, specifically his son-in-law, Herbert Lepien, who married Linker's daughter Della and brought fresh energy to the partnership. Now here's where it gets interesting. On January 24, 1921, in a barn filled with the familiar sounds of a working dairy, the gentle lowing of cattle, the rhythmic swish of tails, the soft thud of hooves on wooden floors, something extraordinary was taking shape. Princess Johanna Rag Apple Pontiac, barely 2 years old herself and heavy with her first calf, was shifting restlessly in the deep straw bedding. When her labor began, no one could have predicted they were witnessing the birth of a legend. The calf that slipped into the world was a bull, black and white, sturdy and alert, with eyes that seemed to hold unusual intelligence. In that lamplit barn, as Herbert Lepien toweled the newborn dry and helped him to his unsteady feet, there was no fanfare, no proclamation of greatness. Just another Holstein calf taking his first breaths on a Wisconsin dairy farm. But folks, what happened next revealed the true measure of both cow and calf. Fresh from delivering her son, Princess Johanna Rag Apple Pontiac stepped into the test stall for her 7-day official trial. In that week, as winter winds howled across the Wisconsin countryside, she produced 26 pounds of butter equivalent, a staggering performance for any cow, let alone a first calf heifer. The numbers told a story that every cattleman understood. This young mother possessed something special, and if genetics held true, her bull calf might possess it too. 8 months later, on a warm summer day, when the corn stood tall in Wisconsin fields, County Agent Milton Button paid what seemed like a routine visit to the Linker Lepien operation. Now Button's job was to help farmers improve their herds, and his trained eye could spot potential where others saw just another calf. When he watched that young bull move across the pasture, the way he carried himself, the breadth of his chest, the length of his stride, something just clicked. "That's a good bull," Button told Herbert Lepien that day. Those words would prove absolutely prophetic. Someone should buy that calf. 6 miles south of Hartford, Joe Piek was building dreams of his own. His farmhouse perched on a hillside southeast of town, looking out over the rolling countryside toward Holy Hill, that religious shrine that drew pilgrims from across the region. Piek had recently committed himself to Holstein cattle, purchasing 14 heifer calves at a Fond du Lac sale, youngsters ranging from 6 weeks to 8 months old, costing him anywhere from $60 to $150 each. Like any beginning breeder worth his salt, Piek knew his next decision would shape his entire program, selecting a herd sire. Feeling the weight of inexperience, he enlisted Milton Button's guidance. Together they canvassed the countryside, inspecting herds and evaluating prospects. When Button recommended the Lepien calf, Piek didn't hesitate. The young bull who arrived at Piek Spring Stock Farm that summer stepped into a world where excellence was expected, and hard work was the only currency that mattered. In the white farmhouse kitchen, 9-year-old Anna Piek was already mixing warm milk for calves on cold mornings, learning the rhythms of farm life that would shape her character. She had no way of knowing that one of those calves, the gentle giant who followed her around the barnyard like an oversized pet, would one day change the world. Anna would later remember a detail that makes me smile. "Do you pour the warm water into the milk, or the milk into the warm water when feeding calves?" She would ask visitors decades later, her eyes still bright with the memory. If you do it wrong, the calf gets diarrhea. Such was the practical wisdom of farm children in an era when every detail mattered. Joe Piek had ambitious plans for his young bull. Each fall, he would rent a boxcar, outfit it with 2x6s screwed into the walls to secure the cattle, partition all stalls, and install water and feed barrels. This rolling barn would carry his hopes and dreams to county fairs across the upper Midwest, where cattle were judged not just on production records, but on that indefinable quality called type, the visual embodiment of dairy perfection. At Walworth County Fair in 1922, as summer heat shimmered over the show rings and the air hung heavy with the scent of cattle and hay, Johanna Rag Apple Pabst made his public debut. Judge A.C. Oosterhouse examined the senior yearling class with the careful attention of a man who understood that his decisions could make or break a breeder's dreams. When he pointed to the bull from Hartford, placing him first and naming him junior champion, Joe Piek felt that first flutter of vindication. But Wisconsin State Fair later that season brought humility, 5th place in a class of 7, a showing that might have discouraged a lesser man. As Piek led his bull from the ring that day, his jaw set with determination, he turned to Herbert Lepien, whose own bull had placed second, and made a declaration that would echo through Holstein history. "This is a good bull. I'll get him in shape next year, and then I'll show the boys a thing or two." And boy, did he ever show them. True to his word, Piek transformed his bull into a phenomenon. The 1923 season saw Johanna Rag Apple Pabst emerge as something unprecedented in Holstein circles. At Illinois State Fair, as the orchestra played and spectators filled the grandstand, the massive bull from Wisconsin moved into the ring with surprising grace for his size. When the judge's final decision came, grand champion, the crowd erupted. The same scene played out at Waterloo Dairy Cattle Congress and the Pacific International Livestock Exposition. But here's what captured hearts across dairy country: the tradition that developed around these victories. Wherever Joe Piek or his mentor John Hetz led Johanna Rag Apple Pabst into a show ring, the house orchestra would strike up "On Wisconsin," the state anthem. As those familiar notes filled the arena and the black and white giant stepped onto the tan bark, spectators would rise to their feet, caught up in the pageantry of it all. The 1924 season brought something that had never been seen before in Holstein competition: absolute perfection. Johanna Rag Apple Pabst went undefeated in both class and grand championship competition. Wisconsin State Fair, Illinois State Fair, Waterloo, the National Dairy Show, all fell before his supremacy like dominoes in a perfectly orchestrated game. Too thick in the pants, his detractors muttered in the barns after the shows, but nobody seemed able to beat him. His consistency was remarkable, not just in winning, but in his demeanor. While other bulls of his era were notorious for their unpredictable temperament, requiring skilled handlers and constant vigilance, Pabst had become the Piek family pet. As gentle with 9-year-old Anna as he was commanding in the show ring. Now here's where the story gets really exciting. While Johanna Rag Apple Pabst was dominating show rings from Wisconsin to Oregon, his first daughters in Joe Piek's modest herd were quietly revolutionizing expectations about what a bull could transmit to his offspring. Every daughter that freshened stepped into the test stall, and their performance was extraordinary. They averaged over 18 pounds of butter in 7 days as junior 2-year-olds, with 2 exceeding 25 pounds, figures that ranked among the very best of their time. More significantly, these daughters were consistently testing 4% butterfat or better, inheriting that remarkable trait from their grandam. In an era when most Holstein herds struggled to maintain butterfat percentages above 3.5%, 4% milk was like finding gold. This combination of show ring dominance and proven transmitting ability created perfect market conditions. Bulls with such show credentials were rare. Bulls with daughters proving themselves in the test barn were rarer still. Bulls with both? Virtually non-existent. Word spread through the Holstein community with the efficiency of a telegraph network. In farm kitchens across the dairy belt, breeders pored over Holstein Friesian World and Farmer's Advocate, studying the production reports and show results that told the story of the bull from Hartford, 400 miles northeast. In the quiet evenings at Mount Victoria Farms, Thomas Bassett Macaulay could often be found in his study, lamplight illuminating the pages of Holstein herd books and back issues of agricultural publications. This Montreal insurance magnate approached his hobby with the same analytical precision that had made him president of Sun Life Assurance Company, one of North America's largest financial institutions. His experiments with corn breeding had opened his eyes to possibilities that most cattle breeders of his era couldn't even imagine. Between 1924 and 1928, Macaulay maintained between 100 and 170 separate corn plots annually, each planted with seed from a single selected ear, each carefully isolated to prevent cross-pollination. His methodical approach, grounded in Mendelian genetics, had convinced him that specific, predictable characteristics could be developed through strategic selection and inbreeding. If it worked with corn, Macaulay reasoned, with the logic of a mathematician, why not with cattle? His vision was breathtaking in its precision. To develop a Holstein bloodline genetically pure for 3 crucial traits: superior show type, excellent udders, and a consistent butterfat test of 4% or better. This wasn't the casual dream of a gentleman farmer. This was a scientifically designed project that would require the same methodical approach that had guided his insurance career. To evaluate Johanna Rag Apple Pabst firsthand, Macaulay dispatched Joseph I. Chandler to the modest farmstead near Hartford. Chandler's train pulled into Hartford on a crisp Wisconsin morning, and the short drive to the Piek farm revealed the stark contrast between his urban Montreal background and this rural heartland. At Piek Spring Stock Farm, with its modest white farmhouse overlooking the countryside, Chandler found himself face-to-face with the bull whose reputation had traveled over 1,000 miles. What he discovered exceeded even Macaulay's optimistic expectations. Here was the top show bull of the day, barely 5 years old and fit for many more years of service. His massive frame spoke of masculine power, while his gentle demeanor revealed a temperament ideally suited for handling. But it was the data that convinced Chandler's business mind. Upwards of a dozen daughters averaging 4% test on official work, all under ordinary farm conditions. Colonel O.G. Clark's Holstein Classic was conceived as more than just an auction. It was the breed's first major promotional extravaganza, designed to capture national attention and elevate the entire Holstein industry. With 450 head cataloged, it was the largest sale in volume to that time, averaging $391 per head in an era when many good cows sold for less than $200. The sale venue buzzed with excitement as cattlemen gathered from across North America. Gourmet meals accompanied by orchestra music followed each day's selling, creating an atmosphere more reminiscent of a society gathering than a farm auction. But everyone understood what they were witnessing. History in the making. When Johanna Rag Apple Pabst's moment came, The arena fell silent except for the familiar strains of On, Wisconsin, as Joe Piek led his champion into the ring for the final time. The bidding began conservatively, but quickly escalated as the significance of the moment became clear. When the hammer finally fell at $15,000, the assembled crowd rose as one, giving 3 lusty cheers for Canada. It was a record price that wouldn't be matched until the wartime boom of 1942, but here's a detail that reveals the human drama. 12-year-old Ellis Knutson, hired to care for cattle at the sale, overheard Colonel Clark's blunt response when Joe Piek suggested reducing the commission because of the publicity. Nonsense. On the last $5,000, Chandler and I were the only 2 bidding. When the train carrying Johanna Rag Apple Pabst pulled into Hudson Heights Station in April 1926, it carried more than just another expensive bull. It carried the future of the Holstein breed. Perched on its wooded plateau overlooking Lake of Two Mountains, Mount Victoria commanded a view that had captivated T.B. Macaulay when he first purchased the property in 1899. Macaulay had prepared for this moment with characteristic precision. The bull was housed in a special, open-faced, 2-story barn built specifically for him, situated in a small paddock north of the main barnyard. From his quarters, Johanna Rag Apple Pabst could survey the rolling Quebec countryside like a monarch overseeing his domain, a fitting metaphor for what he would become. The breeding strategy Macaulay implemented was as methodical as his corn experiments. Around the Mount Victoria cow stable, Macaulay could be seen with his trademark index cards, each containing numbers, flowcharts, and diagrams pertaining to individual herd members. His actuarial background had taught him that complex problems required systematic data collection and analysis. He approached genetics like an insurance calculation, seeking to reduce risk by concentrating proven genetics while tracking every variable that might affect outcomes. The offspring were collectively called rag apples, with individual names typically beginning Montvic Rag Apple, followed by a 4th name. Before many years had passed, any Holstein breeder hearing Rag Apple would correctly assume the reference was to a descendant of Johanna Rag Apple Pabst. What made Johanna Rag Apple Pabst genetically potent wasn't accident. It was the result of deliberate line breeding strategies. His pedigree featured 6 crosses to the dominant sire Pontiac Korndyke and 4 crosses to another titan, Hengerville de Cole. Approximately 36% of his genetic inheritance derived directly from these 4 exceptional sires, a concentration of proven genetics that dramatically increased the likelihood his offspring would inherit and transmit desirable traits. The results exceeded even Macaulay's ambitious expectations. Daughter after daughter emerged with the combination of traits he sought: superior type, excellent udders, and 4% or better butterfat test. Sons proved equally valuable, with bulls like Montvic Pathfinder, Montvic Chieftain, and dozens of others carrying their sire's genetic potency to herds across North America. Johanna Rag Apple Pabst's life at Mount Victoria was productive, but destined to be brief. The end came suddenly in late 1933. At 12 years of age, while moving in his paddock overlooking the Quebec countryside he'd called home for 7 years, the great bull broke his leg at the stifle. The injury was so severe that euthanasia was the only humane option. By then, however, his influence was already spreading far beyond the borders of Mount Victoria. When the Mount Victoria herd was dispersed in 1942, all but 2 of the 89 lots offered were homebred descendants of Johanna Rag Apple Pabst. The dispersal scattered his progeny across North America like seeds from a rare plant, each carrying the potential to influence Holstein genetics for generations to come. Now here's where this story becomes absolutely mind-blowing. In 1958, when T.B. Macaulay's memory was honored by the dairy industry with the hanging of his portrait in the Pioneer Room at the Dairy Shrine Club, it was announced that over 90% of Canadian Holsteins were descendants of Mount Victoria breeding. But that was just the beginning, folks. Today, nearly a century after Johanna Rag Apple Pabst stepped off that train at Hudson Heights, the scope of his genetic influence defies comprehension. No registered Holstein exists anywhere on Earth that does not trace back to this bull. None. Not in the high-tech dairies of California's Central Valley. Not in the grass-fed systems of New Zealand. not in the ancient dairy regions of Europe where the breed originated, not in the emerging dairy industries of Asia and South America. This represents something unprecedented in livestock breeding, the complete genetic transformation of a global breed by a single individual. In every barn, in every pasture, in every milking parlor where Holstein cattle convert feed to milk, the genetic essence of Johanna Rag Apple Pabst flows through their veins. Walk into any modern dairy operation today, and you're witnessing the living fulfillment of T.B. Macaulay's vision. The 4% butterfat that he pursued with such scientific dedication is now routine. The combination of type, udder quality, and production that seemed so ambitious in 1926 has become the baseline from which modern Holstein breeding programs advance toward even greater goals. In a basement office of a modern dairy farm, a young breeder studies genomic evaluations on her computer screen, making mating decisions with precision that would have amazed even T.B. Macaulay. The technology is revolutionary. SNP chips that read genetic code, computer algorithms that predict production potential, satellite-guided feed delivery systems, robotic milking equipment that operates around the clock. Yet the fundamental principles that guide her decisions echo directly back to those index cards Macaulay carried around his cow stable. Identify superior genetics, concentrate them through strategic breeding, measure the results, and build systematically toward clearly defined goals. Behind every great bull stands a network of human decisions, insights, and commitments that make greatness possible. Philip Linker's dedication to quality bulls, even without formal testing programs, Herbert Lepien's foresight and his eye for a superior sire, Milton Button's recognition of exceptional potential in an 8-month-old calf, Joe Piek's relentless dedication to show ring excellence, his willingness to invest in fitting and travel, and his prophetic words about showing the boys a thing or two. His daughter Anna's childhood memories of feeding a gentle giant who would follow her around the barnyard, never knowing she was caring for a future legend. Most significantly, T.B. Macaulay's revolutionary vision, an insurance man's mathematical approach to genetics, combined with unlimited resources and unwavering commitment to specific, measurable goals. From a modest Wisconsin farm to global genetic dominance, from a record-breaking $15,000 sale to influence worth billions in modern breeding programs, from one man's scientific vision to an industry that feeds the world, the story of Johanna Rag Apple Pabst reminds us that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest recognition of excellence. This is a good bull, Joe Piek said after that disappointing 5th-place showing at Wisconsin State Fair in 1922. In barns around the world today, as Holstein calves take their first steps and farmers plan their breeding programs for the next generation, that recognition continues. Every Holstein alive today carries his blood. Every glass of milk, every slice of cheese, every dairy product consumed anywhere on earth bears his influence. The bull who changed everything continues to change everything, one generation at a time, one calf at a time, one farm at a time. His genetic legacy flowing through the veins of the breed that feeds the world. So there you have it, bovine family, the incredible story of Johanna Rag Apple Pabst, the bull whose genetic fingerprint is literally in every Holstein on earth today. From that cold January morning in a Wisconsin barn to the global dairy industry that feeds billions of people, his legacy reminds us that excellence, once recognized and properly developed, has the power to transform the world. Next time you see a Holstein cow, remember this story. Remember that gentle giant who followed 9-year-old Anna Piek around the barnyard. Remember T.B. Macaulay's scientific vision. Remember Joe Piek's determination to show the boys a thing or two. Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey through Holstein history. Until next time, keep breeding for excellence. And remember, sometimes the most extraordinary legacies start with the simplest observation. This is a good bull.
This is the bovine, turn the volume high. For the icons of the ages that never will die. From the show ring thunder to the quiet strength they knew. Hear their stories now, coming right on through. legends live here.